What's up, you guys? Rex here. And I survived another week of medical school, had my second exam. We're in the swing of things. I officially can say I have a schedule, know what I'm doing. We're learning. Life's great. All right, so had my second exam and also my histology practical last Monday. I sort of talked about it a little bit in my video on Friday of I have a study routine. And so if you want to hear about how I study and sort of the routine I've got going thus far in medical school, check out that video. But I feel like I've got a routine. We're doing good. And so this is my first really off weekend because I know I can take a weekend off. And then 2 weekends ago, which was my weekend when I didn't have an exam on Monday, I had to do a lot of pre-work for our team-based learning that was going on. And so I have done absolutely nothing medical related this weekend so far. That being said, I'll probably do a little bit an hour from now, just doing a little bit of pre-reading and looking over the previous week's stuff. But yeah, so as I plan to do every Sunday, I'm going to look back on my week and share something cool that I learned just in an ordinary week of being a medical student. So this week I got to have a lecture on lower limb anatomy, and so I want to go into orthopedic surgery. So that was the coolest lecture I've had. It was also taught by my favorite professor we have so far. And this professor, he's not a doctor or a surgeon or anything. He's actually an evolutionary anthropologist. And so that's super interesting to me of how the perspective he was giving on the lecture sort of really talking about function of the different muscles in the limb. And so obviously as an orthopedic surgeon, I'll have to know all of that function first to then know when things are going wrong. But he brought up sort of an interesting thing about evolution that I hadn't really thought of, in that there's sort of can be one of two camps that drive evolution, or it can be a mixture of both that is really hard to figure out. And that is this animal adapted for the extreme or for the everyday? And so an example of that is you can look at cheetahs and immediately think, all right, all of their evolution, all of their muscles, all of their bones, the driving force of that evolution is running fast. They are for the extreme, that 1 minute when they're chasing a gazelle, and they might not be very good at walking. They might not have an efficient digestive system for eating. They may not be good at sleeping, whatever it is. And so that might be true for cheetahs, but it's not always good to make that assumption right away without evidence. And so with humans, I guess there's sort of a battle in the evolutionary anthropology world of are humans evolved to be good at running? And so the behavioral evidence would be that back in the savannah, humans would be able to run for a longer time than any other animal and chase down a gazelle, and the gazelle would get tired and we'd keep going, and then it would be very easy for us to kill and eat the gazelle. So we're evolved to be good runners for a long time. Alternatively, there's some people that argue we're evolved to be really good walkers, and that we need to walk very efficiently and not waste a lot of energy so we can cover a lot of ground foraging and surviving that way. And so it might be one of those two things might be true. It might be a combination of both. It might be none of those. But sort of just an interesting way to look at evolution, that just because an animal does something doesn't necessarily mean it's evolved to do that. And so that made me think about with humans of a lot of our behaviors we presumably were not evolved to do, such as sitting. I'm sitting right now. We probably weren't evolved to do that. But I more think about some stuff like weightlifting. I do a lot of weightlifting. I love weightlifting. I love squatting. We were probably not evolved to squat heavy loads. That doesn't seem entirely practical and have a good evolutionary advantage to be able to squat a lot for early humans. And so that's an interesting view on human behavior and how to prevent long-term disease. And so this professor, he sort of was all right, all exercise is bad besides maybe swimming and biking. Everything else is bad for our bodies and just deteriorates us. And so maybe I'll learn more about in my orthopedic journey of different behaviors that we can say are evolutionary maladaptive that we do now that are ultimately not good for our bodies, because we can look back and say, all right, these muscles evolved for this reason. And that's a very interesting thing, that our legs are really complicated. It's not just we can kick our leg forward and we can bend our knee and bring our heel to our butt. We have tons of muscles. We have semimembranosus, semitendinosus, adductor magnus, gracilis, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, etc., etc. We have a lot of different muscles, and all of them serve generally different purposes, and some are activated at different points when we're walking, activated at different points when we're running, and it's just interesting that as we learn more about that and determine function better and view it from an evolutionary perspective, that may shape clinical guidance on what movements do not lead to disease in the long term, and make recommendations to patients on how they can move most efficiently as they age to prolong mobility and prolong the half-life of their joints, so to speak. That maybe we are not evolved to live past 50. A lot of times the classic argument for that would be, we've already reproduced at that point. There's no real advantage to keep living. We've passed on our genes. We've made it. And so that's but what I'm saying is, just because that seems logical doesn't necessarily mean it is. That evolution might be a lot more complex than that. And we might be evolved to live till we're 90. Who knows? I don't know. But so I didn't really share anything maybe that I learned. I more just shared questions that were raised. And so it was cool to think about. And so I like thinking about those questions. I like reflecting on them. Let me know down below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns related to any of that stuff. If you're an expert on evolutionary anthropology, drop it down below and teach me something cool. I love learning. Hope you learned something too. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want to catch any more of this content. As always, like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. And until next time, don't be ordinary, go be great.